Hey folks, my name is Adam and I like to make tiny nerdy things, and I recently found myself really wanting to make a Cubone. However, I also found myself really wanting to make a Machamp. So I said to myself, why not make them both? And through the power of slapping two things together really hard, I ended up with this handsome little fella, who I shall lovingly name Mabone. Q-Champ. Now with Q-Champ's name and form figured out, I can use this as a rough template to make my armature. I'll start by making his great big egg-shaped belly out of aluminium, then covering it in clay using that tried and true technique of smashing things together. Ball achieved, it's just a case of smoothing and shaping until I've got a teardrop shaped egg, then I'll give it the old tap tap cure to harden the clay. Finally, to achieve maximum sad boy smooth body, I'll give it a full once over with sandpaper. Then I can drill a series of strategically placed holes for one pair of legs and two pairs of arms. I'll get the legs in place first and then reinforce them with short strips of wire to keep my body from tilting forward. Then I can mount it on a block and cut myself some aluminium arm bones. These will get glued into my pre-drilled armholes, and I'll also take a minute to mark out equal lengths on the wire so that I can be certain that my arms are all proportioned the same. Now Q-Champ is a beer-bellied, four-armed monster wearing a skull as a hat, so anatomical accuracy isn't high on my list of priorities. That being said, I do want to make sure that all the arms are at least accurate to one another. Otherwise, it's on to bulking out the limbs, starting with the legs and feet. To make Timmy's hands, I'll roll out a medium-sized wormy dealie, then cut it into roughly equal quarters. I'll then flatten them, make 4 equal cuts about halfway down, then pinch and roll until they kinda look like little fingies, before adding a thumb and attaching it to the body. Now the left hand gets the exact same treatment, but will be performing a knife hand strike instead of the open palm attack. Then to make the two top hands, I'll make a pair of femurs that have been whittled down to a point and then bake them so they're nice and hard. I can then stick these into the palms of the upper arms and bend the fingers around so they're holding them in an appropriately bone-holding fashion. Finally, I'll give it a nice once-over with my isopropyl alcohol to smooth out some of the rougher edges and remove the myriad of fingerprints that I always seem to leave behind. Then all that's left to do with the body is to add the tail and those two back spike things. To make Timmy's head, I'll crumple up some foil and then smack it on the table until it develops a nice clay shell. I figured it'd be easier to make the head underneath the skull, bake it, and then build the skull on top, rather than trying to do it all in one go, so I've approximated the head shape, marked out the eyeballs, then baked it so I can slather it in bacon bond and start slowly building up the shape of the skull. Now for any of you that are watching this and are unaware of the origin stories of Cubone's helmet, well, ignorance is bliss. Enjoy your not knowing and take my advice. Do not ever look up Cubone's backstory. Otherwise, at this point, I've got the shape of a skull cap finished and smoothed, and I can start adding the surface details, carving out the nose holes, and adding various cracks and fault lines. And once the tragedy hat is finished, I can pop it in the oven to bake it, and then stick it onto the body. Finally, with the head in place, I can move on to the painting. Now, I had considered going with cubone coloring, but because a nice solid orange color usually involves about 15 or 1600 coats, I decided to go with the Machamp Blue instead. Now, I know what you're thinking. Adam, I hate to be that guy, but doesn't that particular shade of blue look a little less like our beloved forearm wrestler and a bit more like a certain species of little mushroom-dwelling people? And yeah, you're right. I kinda cocked up the coloring with this one, but as is the theme in this video, a quick smack on the table, and all is well. With my character accurate color in place, I'll go on to paint the majority of the body with a lighter shade, leaving the darker recesses untouched. I've thinned this paint out quite a bit, so when it dries it'll be closer to the undercoat in darkness, but give the edges a bit of color variation while highlighting the muscles a tiny bit more. Then with my belly painted lighter blue, I can paint the skull and bones with a nice white bone white. This took quite a few coats to get an even color, but once it was uniform across the entire head, I'll dry brush the edges and recesses with a nice white highlight before getting to work on the nostrils and the eyeballs. Finally, to give the eyes a nice bit of shine, I'll coat them in a little bit of UV resin, and Timmy is all but finished. Now, I could call it good here, but I feel like if I'm going to make a one-of-a-kind Pokemon sculpture, then I really ought to take the time to make his card. Thankfully, after a quick Google search, I found this absolute banger of a website that lets me not only make my own cards, but it lets me make them in the OG Gen 1 style. So all I need to do is fill in the details and the website does the rest. So I'll start with his name, which at this point is Timmy, but for posterity's sake, we'll stick with Q-Champ. Then his type, which will obviously be fighting, and then I figured because of his great big beer belly, he'd have slightly more hit points than Machamp. Now, using my incredible Photoshop skills, I've already made the background art, so I can go ahead and upload that, then pick a species. Now, Machamp is a superpower Pokemon and Cubone is the saddest boy ever, so I'll go halfway and make him a super sad Pokemon. Otherwise, he's standing squat and jacked at 4 foot 5 inches and 285 pounds. His first attack will be called Punches and Bunches, and its damage varies when you roll a dice. If you roll a 3 or higher, then you deal 5 damage and you roll again. Then you repeat this until you roll a 2 or a 1. And his second attack will be called Hands Free. Throw both bones for 80 damage, and after this is used, change Punches and Bunches to successfully roll with a 2 or higher. Finally, I'll give him an unhealthy dose of psychic weakness because he's the saddest boy ever, give him a ridiculously high retreat cost because quitters never win, and I can give him an appropriate flavor text. Something like, he's got 2 hands to wipe away the tears, which means he's got 2 left for making 'em. Then it's just a case of filling in a few of the extra flavor details, and it's the moment of truth. And there it is, a truly one-of-a-kind Gen 1 Q-Champ card, which means it's time to print this bad boy out. Now I could just cut it out and glue the front and the back together, but I like to make these sorts of cards as 3-dimensional as I can, so I printed out a couple extra copies on an extra thick piece of paper so I can cut the various sections of the cards out and build them up on top of the main body. It adds a bit of depth to the cards, and is a quick and easy way to make a flat card a tiny bit more interesting. Finally, with the last piece in place, the card is finished, and we're on to the Glamour Shots. Now, making tiny nerdy things every week is an oddly expensive endeavor, so a massive thank you to the fine folk over on Patreon that keep me fed and this channel churning out weird stuff every week, and a very special shout out to my newest patrons, Wamasi, Terrio Pixie, Rue, Blizzard B, Zen B, Nick Smith, Fortuna Luna, Mariah Richards, Kitty May, Pullman Ray, Annie is okay, Riot Shaw, Jackson Sirline, Joey Jojo Schmabadoo, Charlotte Ingverson, Greg Sowell, Seb Partlet, someone named Sean, Phil Thorne, Amanda, Ziggy the Space Dog, Not a Raccoon, and randomly yours. You are the tragic bone-shaped helmet into which this sad boy of a channel fits its sad, sad head. As always, now is a great time to subscribe, or hit that little like button. Sorry, smash that like button, and then do all the other usual things. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Cheers.